couple of things that emerged from this morning that I thought were particularly important. We also talked about in the committee. First, it's absolutely critical that leaders take the initiative, first to understand resilience, but even more important, to think beyond their immediate terms or the next election. If we don't take the long view on issues like resilience, we are not going to be prepared. And then we're going to have these very unpleasant, expensive surprises when we get things like Hurricane Sandy. So politicians, particularly elected officials who do worry about the next election, have to have the courage to say to a community, we need to be able to plan long term, we need to spend money now in order to protect ourselves and spend less later. The second point I thought was very important from this morning's discussions is the issue of how communities work together. There was an emphasis, which was welcome to hear, on the combination of private, public sector, government sector, nonprofits, and a beginning finally of a conversation about bringing in people I would call your private citizens, who often do form coalitions. They may be part of community organizations, but that's very critical. It's particularly critical to bring in private citizens in order to understand, as was emphasized this morning, how to communicate. What are people listening to? What messages are going to resonate? What meaning does the word risk have? What are the languages? Some of the work that I've done shows that the word risk and riesgo in Spanish have exactly the same meaning technically, but the cultural meaning behind the word is different for a Latino community and a non-Latino community. So how do we deal with things like that? But the second reason it's so critical to involve the citizens was stated very nicely this morning when the statement was made that the first responders are going to be your family and they're going to be your neighbors. And if you and your family haven't thought things through, or if you and your neighbors don't know each other, you're not going to be as effective. And I thought about that a lot as I watched the Sandy response. I live in upstate New York, and I saw many, many examples of family and neighbors being the first responders and helping each other. I was actually very encouraged by the Sandy response. Years ago, when I lived in California, we as a neighborhood had a whole plan for what we would do in the event of an earthquake. And when the Northridge quake hit, we invoked the plan. We didn't see official help for 3 or 4 days, but we had a system where if you were safe, you put a green flag in front of your house. And then we checked all the neighbors who didn't have a flag or who had a red flag. And we pooled together things like cooking. We knew who on the block was prepared to give first aid, for example. So that as a small community, we were prepared for that earthquake. And that's, again, Sandy, I don't think people were as distinctly prepared, but I think there was a very natural, strong cultural response to help each other. And it's possible that 9/11 was part of that. Another important thing that was said this morning was you really don't prepare for disasters like these until you've lived through one. The fact that New York City had lived through 9/11 probably prepared people to be more resilient for Sandy.